Round two.
All right. Welcome back to the After Hours show for the Speaker Agenda show. Again, we've got Michael Beygelman. We're going to continue this conversation about HR analytics and fun stuff like that. So, on your website, again, I was reading one of your blog posts, and I didn't know you were pushing it out to social, but sites like Glassdoor are extremely popular for candidates they go to get kind of a sentiment analysis, if you will. They'll leave the pros and cons. But obviously, the reviews there are anything but objective, right? Do you see anything wrong with candidates using that kind of biased information to make decisions on whether or not they should be looking for new job opportunities? Or what's your opinion
I
on
have like,
it? This isn't just Glassdoor, by the way.
I
It's
know,
fun.
yeah. I'm a little schizophrenic on this topic, so allow me to talk to myself for a minute. I'm going to
Yeah,
talk about it both sides. On the one hand, I'm a believer in transparency. It's how I'm wired, right?
right.
So the notion of getting, sort of transparency about something is appealing to me. So from that perspective, to your point, Glassdoor or it doesn't matter, Kununu, whatever. There's lots of sites like this, correct? The idea of this is really tantalizing, right? I, as a prospective job seeker, know that it's more than just money, right? I want to understand am I a fit, what do other people think, etc. So I want to learn more, right? So I think that is really, really good. The real problem with this is the dark side, and the dark side is that history says that people typically vent more than they provide positive feedback.
Right.
So you're much more likely to leave a negative review than a positive review, not because we're evil, we're called humans,
Well, we're
right?
just a bunch of little baby complainers.
That's
That's
right.
all.
So it's just and it's very sad because if you look at a company with 50,000 employees, there may be 20 people that are unhappy, correct? But you know that adage of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's very unfortunate.
But
Having
it's
said
so
that,
funny. I was reading some Glassdoor reviews the other day, and like even like a 4.5 star, it seems like everybody is right around the 3.5 to 4.2 stars, right? But I don't know how that's possible in a 5-star rating system, but law of averages, I guess. But if you start reading them, almost every review, whether it's positive or negative, starts off with 2 or 3 pros and like 8 cons.
of course.
Every single one. Doesn't matter whether they
And
got
then
a
you get 4 stars, right?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
regardless of whether they got a 2 or a 4, it didn't matter. I mean, they always had more cons to say than they had pros.
Yeah, and and people with psychology degrees know this, right? You remember the sting of pain way more than
Right.
the euphoria of pleasure, correct?
Yep.
Uh, and this is just how we're wired. It's the whole fight or flight kind of thing, like how people are wired. So it's kind of we can't help ourselves. It's just who we are. Having said that, I think it's really interesting because first of all, I learned I used to have a global role for about a decade, right? And something counterintuitive I learned: a 5-star rating system in the U.S. is actually 3 to 5. There is no 2. But when you go to Europe, a 5-star rating is really 1 to 4. There is no 5. So it's really, really interesting that it's really fascinating that like ratings in other countries are not really the same way that they are in America. Like here, if you leave somebody a 2, you're absolutely roasting them,
Yeah.
right? Versus like in Germany, a 3 is pretty good.
Okay.
So it's
Well,
this
it's
is
kind of
like,
like, what's a 3? This,
yeah,
or this,
yeah.
you know?
So in the U.S., we tend to use a 3 to 5 scale. This
Right.
is just something you could look up. It's very fascinating. So it's no wonder that most reviews are between like 3.5 and 4.2 because they roast you and they leave you a 4. A
Yeah.
4 is kind of like a B plus, right?
Yep.
Something like that. Okay, but I actually, I'm definitely not naming names, but I know someone who is a Glassdoor manager at a company. Their job is to get their Glassdoor ratings higher. That is literally
Is
their
that how
job.
companies should be managing, in your opinion, a
Oh, absolutely
Glassdoor?
not. And
Okay.
they'll all deny it, but they all have this person. Like
Yeah.
every one of them has this person. Sometimes it's an entire department, right? The PR people, oh my God, something negative was said on Twitter. Boom, mobilize, right? Boom, 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 right? Get the army going to say positive things because we want to offset the sting of that one negative thing. What happened is Glassdoor became like the world's largest venting platform to no fault of its own. And it also
Well, didn't
created
they
an
start off as F company? I mean, I don't think that's no fault of their own. It's what they named the company. That
why
was
do you
their
have to,
predecessor, right?
why do
Was
you have
F
to bring
company,
that up
right?
on this PG rated show?
Well, I just didn't say the word, and that's what
I,
it was called. It was F company, right?
yeah,
And that
which
was,
was actually
during the Silicon Valley.com bust, when I knew people that were going into work, they were getting the entire company would get shut down, and they'd be walking $10,000 back end servers out the back door
yeah.
and loading it up into their little Fiats or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's the world. But I agree with you. It's just and then today Glassdoor is just a job board. At the end of the day, they
Yeah.
use the feedback system to attract more job postings. They were acquired by Recruit, which owns Indeed, and they're just essentially a job board. And like you can't really fault them because feedback is not a business model. So it's like ultimately it's very expensive to do what they do. So they actually need to make money. So they essentially use the auspices of come create a company profile, see what people are saying, and oh, by the way, how many job postings do you want?
Right.
Uh, it's just really what it kind of became. And I just think like it's necessary, but like you have to, like anything else, take it with a grain of salt.
Isn't that
Um,
like falsifying a Yelp review, though? There's
oh, you
been
mean they're
lots of
falsified?
Sorry? Come on, man. There's fake restaurant reviews, fake hotel reviews, and
Amazon
stuff like
fake
that.
news. Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I don't know. I take everything on there with a grain of salt, whether it's Yelp or whether it's uh, Glassdoor, Kununu, any of those rating systems,
It's it
because
it's really
my
interesting.
experience inside of some of these organizations were completely different than people on my team or even my managers, my executive leadership team. My experience is my experience, right? And yeah, I don't even write those types of reviews. I don't think my personal experience is going to be completely different than yours. I have a different
I mean,
personality.
ultimately, people, this is also like, I hate to generalize, but people kind of work for a manager, not a company. This is kind of
Right.
how people feel. People work for people, not logos. So their experience is going to often, not always, but often be confined to their peer group and
Yeah.
their direct reports. And it may not resemble the rest of the organization at all. Um, and we also are in an era of narcissism. I don't know if you know that. Joking. But now that we're after hours, we can talk about such things.
Yep.
But in this era of narcissism, people are, everybody's a victim. So if you didn't have a good experience, it's because you were singled out. It's because the company's bad. It has to be their fault because it can't possibly be you. So then, these websites offer these types of things. So I'm going to kind of digress for a second on this topic. It's actually, I'm very passionate about it. It is for this reason why we allow, or we build technology that allows companies to actually measure job seeking activity patterns because it's unbiased. Like people could say what they want to say. That's like water cooler talk, but unless they're actually looking for work, it's just water cooler talk.
Right.
And that, like for example, you see postings like 73% of the people are looking for work.
Right.
All right. I don't want to get bleeped. Let's just say it's BS. But companies that say things like this want you to buy job postings.
Well, I would say that I think it's pretty accurate, but I don't think they're an active candidate. I think they are, if a job happens to come across their email from Indeed because they send out 1,000 alerts a day, right? They'll take a look at it, but that doesn't mean they're actually actively applying to that job. But they are. I mean, technically, they're looking, right? So,
Anyone who's
which
actively
depends on how you
employed,
define it.
anyone who has a job is always looking. That's
Yeah.
just the reality.
Well,
So,
not
but
always,
then,
but yeah.
but then it's not like 83%, it's 100. So like, because we actually measure job seeking activity patterns, and we
Right.
can tell you that it's close to 13%, not 83.
Okay.
About 13% of the people have passive job seeking activities.
Passive, not active.
Correct.
Okay.
So the thing is, like, if you get an email from a headhunter, I get 9 a day. Of course I read it and I just delete it. That doesn't make me a
Right.
passive job seeker. I just want to know if there's something in it for me. But that's just human nature, right?
Right.
And then I immediately delete it. And most people are like that. So if you actually look at job seeking activity patterns, passive job seekers, these are people that are poking around. That's why they're passive. They're not actively on websites applying to jobs. They're connecting, they're networking, they're polishing up their background to look better, things of that nature. And that number is less than 13%, correct?
Yeah,
Uh,
I was following a few posts on LinkedIn where um, people were actually getting reprimanded by their managers for updating their LinkedIn profiles, right? Thinking that, what are you going to go out and start looking for a job because you
yeah,
updated your LinkedIn? It's like, no, I have an update. I update my resume once or twice a year. I update my LinkedIn profile probably once a month because I'm in that staffing talent acquisition space. But most people look at their LinkedIn profile maybe once every 3 months or so. It's like a resume. But if you're going to update it, I don't think that's necessarily making you interested in
okay,
looking for another
totally, I
job.
totally agree. And in fact, I have kids that are going to be graduating from college this year.
God, you're old.
Uh, I
I'm older
started.
than you, honestly.
Yeah, I betrothed. I started having kids at a young age. No, I'm joking. And so I know them and people that are recent grads, correct? And I talk to them and I just say like, start getting in a habit of just updating LinkedIn profile every week. Therefore, it's not a joke or a shock to someone when you update it every week.
There you
But if
go.
you don't update your profile for like years and all of a sudden you're starting to update your profile, it's like suddenly you
That's a
start wearing perfume when you never wore perfume. Like something
right,
is going on, right? I think it's just a good habit. I think LinkedIn is the world's yellow pages and white pages. And, when we grew up, the white and the yellow pages were the way you found phone numbers. You
right.
had to be in the yellow and the white pages. So I talk to recent grads to say, you should just update it every week, maybe 2, 3 times a week. Just get in the habit of it.
Yep.
Because that's where people are going to look for your information, and then it won't be a shock. And then,
Change your profile picture, change your background, change
yeah,
out your header picture, change
exactly.
it
Make
up.
it interesting because, like, you also want to be noticeable. The problem is, remember we talked about in our main segment about where it's no longer about finding a needle in a haystack. It's about finding a unique piece of hay, and that's a
Right.
very different problem. And if you're not updating your information, then you're undifferentiated. Right? But
That's true.
if you're updating your information, your Google rankings are higher, for example, because Google indexes all public web pages and it puts things to the top that have more content and changes of content. So if you update your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, you're gonna have much, much higher Google rankings.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you Google Jeff Widener, I'm almost always on. I usually dominate that first page, and
Yeah.
that's
That's
by
why you get a
design.
last name like Beygelman. You definitely are the first response.
Well, if you can spell it, most people are going to spell it Bagel, right?
Oh yeah, for
You
sure.
threw a Y in there, just and
I always come up number one. I promise you.
kind of like one of the first people I ever recruited was Rama Mohan Vakalagada. I'll never forget that name, right? Never forget Michael Bigman either.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think this is the thing. There's nothing wrong with like I think the companies that basically proliferate this notion that everybody's looking for work. It's not necessarily bad for the economy because it makes employers sharper. Correct. If
Yeah.
you have threat or risk of potential voluntary attrition, you're going to be sharper, right? You're going to do more things. So I don't really say that's bad behavior. It's just not accurate. Does that make sense?
Well, with the aging population, almost every organization is under a tremendous amount of pressure and risk for losing a vast majority of their
Yeah,
employees,
for
probably
sure.
25, 30%. And the peak of the baby boomer retirement happens in the next peak, at least, is in 2021, I believe. So that's going to be interesting to see what
Yeah,
happens there.
yeah, for sure. And there's other like disinformation, like not to digress, but like for example, people pontificate this rise of the contingent workforce, right? And all you have to do is just fact check it to see, in fact, the contingent workforce has declined steadily since 2005. And people are going, oh, 50% of the workforce will be contingent by 2030. And yet
Yeah.
every single piece of data says it's actually declining.
Well, I think what's happening is they're getting a full-time job and then picking up side hours because they can't afford to make their ends meet on one job, right? So they might have two or
Yes. Now,
three.
anybody actually stop to say 50% of the workforce?
No,
Like, that's a joke. That means if you go down your neighborhood and there's 80 houses, 40 of them are gig workers.
yeah,
Like, that's
not
just
going to happen.
not true. It's not even
No,
remotely true. right?
No.
Like, I think maybe 2 people in my neighborhood have like second jobs, not like, 1,000. But like, again, data is really, really interesting, right? Sometimes people use data to make a point, but it doesn't make it true. Like,
Right.
one of the jokes that we use, and I'll stop here, is that like, if you went to McDonald's and you ask people if they like fries, you're gonna have like 97% of the people say they love fries.
Of course. Fries are delicious.
Of course.
They're not keto though, but okay. Michael Beygelman, you are absolutely awesome. Again, if anybody's interested in getting more information about Claro HR, data analytics, HR, workforce analytics, fun stuff like that, please go to Claro HR. There's a little link right at the top. You can contact him and request a demo, or just talk to Michael. I'm sure you can find him on social media. I'll include all the links down in the description below. Michael, again, thank you so much for being on the Speaker Agenda Show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it. Lots of luck with everything.
Quite welcome, guys. Make it a great one.
Bye-bye.